So we have a keynote speaker today that we signed up in September or something last year. Jay Pipes came to me and said, Martin, wouldn't it be great if we had Jonathan Schwartz as a keynote speaker? And I knew I was going to have dinner with him in November. So I said, Jay, I'll ask him. And Jonathan actually got to ask me a question first. But you are here, Jonathan, because the community wanted you as a keynote speaker. So you're very welcome. The floor is yours. I think you have 35 minutes only as well. It has to go fast here. But welcome on stage.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you here.
So what Martin didn't tell you is that he actually invited me to dinner because he said, I know you really want to do this keynote, but you're not going to have a dinner with me unless you buy the company. And then he takes 5 minutes of my keynote, which is a little frustrating. So enough of this free software stuff, right? So what I thought I would do, and look, Martin and I, if you've read the blog, along with Rich, we've all known one another for a while, and we've had a very similar objective for at least the past 3 or 4 years. And bringing the two companies together, I can't tell you how similar we are. And and on the one hand, we can talk about we have similar culture, we have similar values. I'd also like to let you know that we have similar dysfunctions, like any family. And that fact has actually been confirmed to me over the past couple, 3 weeks as we've had a whole series of internal debates. And Rich and I were remarking this morning how similar this feels to the rest of Sun. We're a group of, at Sun, 32,000 people, about 11,000 engineers, each of whom has their own opinion and their own set of objectives, which is what makes a community so interesting and vibrant and diverse. And the good news is, from my vantage point, the MySQL community has very much joined that family and has really taken to heart the fact that we're all responsible to one another, and we're responsible to a much, much broader community as well, which is the community that we serve across the world. So what I thought I could do is reveal the real secret agenda here and talk to you about what we're really up to, and enough of this free software power. And I thought I'd start by talking to you about a supercomputing facility I visited a few weeks back down in Austin, Texas. The supercomputer down there is run by the Texas Advanced Computing Center. It's a 500 teraflop open supercomputing facility. I'll tell you what open means in a moment. And it is 4,000 blades, 16,000 sockets, 64,000 cores, hundreds of terabytes of RAM, petabytes of storage. It's truly extraordinary. It's just amazing. It's bigger than any other National Science Foundation granted supercomputing facility. All of them combined in the U.S. aren't as big as this. All of them combined. And this is a truly extraordinary facility because it is open. And by open, I mean there is no proprietary software anywhere within it. Just none. Zero. They don't have time, they don't have the energy, they just want to get to running, their jobs and doing what it is that they do with a supercomputing facility. So what do they do with the supercomputing facility? The first thing they assume is they don't know what the applications are. They just know they'll need lots of computation, lots of storage, lots of bandwidth. So they're open in that you can submit jobs and you can go run them. And in fact, one of the things we're going to be doing, we actually have a very small sliver of the time that's on the supercomputer, and we can go do performance modeling and performance testing for the technologies that we build at Sun. But within the first 2 quarters or so of making the supercomputer available to researchers and academics, they filled up demand for the supercomputer. They're out of computational capacity. 500 teraflops was used basically, like that. They are now, having to meter and allocate and ration and think about building another 500 teraflop supercomputing facility. So it's extraordinary to watch what's happening. Now, when I was there, the individuals here, the guy on the left is a congressman. The guy next to him is a guy named Dan Atkins, who's the director of Office of Cyber Infrastructure for the National Science Foundation. I'm there with my beaming smile and my fetching tie. The guy next to me is Jay Boisseau, who's really the passionate leader behind TAC, and then the guy to the right of him is Hector Ruiz, who's the chief executive officer of AMD, whose cores are inside TAC. And what was amazing when I was down there, we were opening the facility, was how many private sector companies were actually in the audience listening. Energy companies, pharmaceutical companies, automobile companies. And they were there to see what the future of computing actually was. Now, there was one researcher that I met with after this. I walked up to the bar to get water, of course. And this guy about this tall, and his glasses were about that thick, walked up next to me and he said, "Hi." And I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I simulate the universe." You probably do. And we got to talking, and this guy was the originator of something called Zeus, which is an open source library for doing magnetohydrosimulation, which is in fact simulating the universe. And it was fascinating talking to him. He actually been in the open source community for about 17 years. That's when he first introduced the library into the community. And I asked him, is there any proprietary software left in supercomputing that you know of? Any? And he kind of thought to himself, and he said, "Nope, can't think of any. It's gone. We don't have the time, we don't have the money, we don't have the patience. We just want to get to work." So it was an amazing experience. It was an amazing experience not just because of the scale of the facility. It was amazing because of what was going on in the facility, that it was open to innovation from across the world, open to individuals across the world. And then during the opening speech, Dan Atkins made this comment that just really, really stuck with me, which was computational science is the third mode of discovery, complementing physical experimentation and theory. And when I heard that, look, we build computers at Sun, we build software at Sun, we build storage at Sun, it helps people run their business, it helps them, run their payroll and run their ERP applications. But really having this guy stand on stage and talk about the social utility, the scientific utility of computation was interesting. It was a little world-changing for me to hear him actually say, no, this has valid, legitimate scientific purpose. That the industry has valid, legitimate scientific purpose. So this was pretty transformational. It also resonated pretty strongly with what we're trying to do as a company. And so when you ask the question of what does it take to explore the universe, you end up thinking, well, that guy who built this open source library is in fact exploring the universe. And computational facilities here in Japan and Europe building the International Space Station is leveraging open source software to change how we understand the world when we think about the world. Folks in the audience were modeling drugs, were folding proteins, were understanding the genome, were understanding disease, and we're improving society as a result of that understanding. One of the more interesting and most interesting customers I've interacted with recently was this bank in South Africa called the Standard Chartered Bank that is actually giving handsets, giving phones to people to increase their wealth. And you think about that for a second, and I was meeting with this guy, and he said they were growing like a weed, things were growing very, very rapidly. And I said, that's not the West's perception of the African economy, that you're growing lots of new bank accounts every day. And I said, how is that happening? And this guy ended up saying, there's a couple reasons why people stay poor. They stay poor because of crime. Because if you have money in your pocket, it can be stolen. So when we give them a phone, all of a sudden their wealth is in the network. It can't be stolen anymore. It's like, wow, that's interesting. And he said the second reason they stay poor is because they lack access to information. And I said, what's an example of that? He said, well, imagine you grow wheat. And, it's a fairly significant agrarian economy in Africa. And if you're growing wheat and you sell it for a nickel a bushel, and the broker who comes to town tells you it's worth a nickel, you say, okay, I guess that's what it's worth. You get your nickel, you go back to trying to be a subsistence farmer. He turns around, he takes it back to the town center, he sells it for $5. Until you've got a phone. And a friend of yours is sitting in the town center, and he sends you an SMS message and says, it's worth $5. And all of a sudden the broker can't just give you a nickel. He's got to give you $4.50. And you're better off. You create wealth, you open a bank account, Standard Bank is happy, MTN, the wireless operator is happy, and Sun is happy because both those companies happen to run on our infrastructure. And are happen to run on open source software. Now there's not an open source phone yet, but stay tuned because that's exactly our intent We think that industry needs a little disruption on its own. But again, what does it take to go fuel a developing economy? It takes the computational technologies, the software technologies, the systems technologies. What does it take to connect with your friends? Obviously, it takes MySQL. But it takes computation, it takes storage, it takes core technology that we as an industry are building together. So when we think about all of these diverse ways that computation has made its way into the marketplace, that free software has made its way into the marketplace, that all the innovation has made its way into the marketplace, it seemed very evident to me that like electricity, like clean water, access to the network has become a social utility. The network itself has become a social utility. Now, I don't know about you, but all of us, and especially if you're in the open source community, you've got your pick of jobs. Right now, there's so much innovation. There's so many companies who want to figure out how they can leverage open source to go improve their business or change their industry. We can all pick what we do. And when I was asked to be CEO 2 years ago last week, I'm not going to count it, one of the questions I got asked by a group of my friends was, so what do you want to do? What's the point here? And I made a comment to them, which, of course, like any good artist, I had stolen from somebody else, but I won't tell you who I stole it from. I just love the statement. I want Sun to be a great company. I really do. I think we're a really important company because of the change we can drive to the marketplace. But I also want Sun to be a good company. Because if what you're trying to do is cultivate a community, you can't do that with money. You have to do that with intent. You have to do that with your values. And if we can combine the two of these, we can actually make them like MySQL has. We can make them reflective of one another. The greater you are, the gooder you are. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to work with the communities, drive innovation, and as we do that, we create more opportunity for ourselves, we create more opportunities for our partners, we create more opportunities for our customers, we create more opportunities for the planet. Now, it's great theater around what's Web 1.0 and trademark around Web 2.0, with my thanks to Tim O'Reilly for giving me permission to use it. Where are we headed? I don't really know. But I can tell you a few things I know about the future of the web. The first of which starts with this picture. Now, if we can dim the lights, me too, you can just take the lights off here. They've had enough. Can you get the lights on me now? Oh, me. The ball. You take the ball. Getting close. You can do it. Have courage. Hang on. There you go. Okay, so this is a map. These maps are about the favorite things, my favorite things at Sun. This is just like the best part of my job. These are all the places that downloaded the MySQL community server in January. Now, the blue dots are hard to see when the map is there. So if you take the map away, that's what you see. I don't know about you, but I love that map. I just think it's the coolest thing in the world. And this is who is demanding free software. It's going to be, it already is, the majority of the planet. And certainly there's some places that have, insufficient access to infrastructure. You can see the U.S. and Western Europe and Japan, is brightly lit, and the other economies aren't. But there's an immense amount of physical distribution that's taking place right now across Asia, across Africa, across Eastern Europe, which doesn't show up here right now. So free software is overtaking the world. By definition, I see it. I see it everywhere I go, everybody I talk to, every institution we care about. We see free software continuing to change what's going on. And again, this is January. This is Glassfish, which is the open source Java application server we've been building. This is March for Glassfish. And again, just to go back, I think I can go back a slide. You can see, MySQL is really, really popular. I think the number is, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 60,000 to 70,000 downloads a day.
Correct.
Think about that. In fact, Mark sent me a note recently saying, I think we've hit saturation. And I said, what does that mean? He's like, well, if you do the math, there's only about 40 million developers in the world. At about 70,000 a day, you might be hitting all of them. So Glassfish, again, by consistent investment, You can see we're doing reasonably well in Brazil, across India. We're seeing a lot of popularity across Australia, Western Europe, Japan. This is what's going on with ZFS, which is the zettabyte file system, which today is under a CDDL license, but rumor has it there might be a change in its future. And I'll tell you the one thing that I see in all of this, and we can put the lights back how they were before. See if you can figure it out now. Back up. There's one thing I know. How much more obvious can it be? The future is going to be defined by free. Those developing nations, developing economies, developing companies, developing academic environments, the next generation of innovation in the marketplace is going to be defined by the price tag free, and more importantly, by the philosophy of freedom. Because all the places that downloaded that software around the world have said, we want to be in control of our own destiny. And if you look at what's going on across the world, there are more and more people every day who are saying, freedom matters to me. Freedom matters to me because I want access to my own laws. I want access to my own healthcare information. I want access to my own business systems. I want access to performance. And I don't want to be hung up on somebody's proprietary definition of what innovation is or some proprietary licensing model. So one of the questions we got when we announced the acquisition of MySQL was, so what's the secret agenda, son? What's going to go on here? Are you anti-this or anti-that? And our response was, old tapes. We have to be careful when we say that because we have a tape business, and they always hate it when we say tapes, old tapes. I'll tell you a funny story about tapes in a minute. So, there's a guy at Sun named Simon Phipps who has this wonderful picture of what the open source community looks like. He says it looks like the Amazon River. Now, you think the Amazon River was one big honking river, and it is, it's huge. But the reality is, it's comprised of 10,000 small rivers. They all happen to feed one general direction. And so when we think about what are the communities we want to be a part of, what are the communities we want to fuel, how do we take our resources, the resources of a Fortune 200 company, and go drive progress and innovation across the world? It's not going to happen if we're anti some community or anti-progress. What's going to happen is if we actually stand up and say, no, we're pro-open source, we're pro-free software. And so when we fully embrace that notion, when we truly put our resources and our commitment behind a diversity of communities, then we're truly committed to the community. Then we're truly committed to progress. And are we going to put our own dollars behind some of these more so than others? Obviously, we just put $1 billion behind the N and LAMP. But we know it's LAMP, it's not STAMP or WAMP or anything else. So each of these communities has an interesting set of priorities. They've all got an interesting set of philosophies, just like inside Sun. We've all got a diversity of opinions, but we're all committed to the same thing, which is driving progress. The partners that we work with across the world, here's a list of those that are represented here. We have always been a partner-rich company. We're a company that's defined by working with others. There's one of the great seminal quotes at the foundation of Sun is, innovation happens elsewhere. Here's proof. I think those pictures, with the dots on them, are even more proof. That's where innovation is happening. That's what we want to fuel. So the one thing that's very, very clear to us is free software drives innovation for us. It drives choice for us. And when I say us, it's the inclusive us. And it drives value. Now, for whom does it drive that value? Well, getting back to that supercomputing facility we talked about at the beginning, it's pretty evident to me that it's going to drive value for the planet as we discover the next generation of drugs, as we more effectively simulate the universe, or the weather, or disease. It's pretty clear to me that if we continue investing, and there's a reason I'm in a suit and tie today, it's not for this community, it's for the customers I'm about to talk to about signing big site license agreements for MySQL. Enterprises around the world, if you read the last blog that I posted just yesterday, I'll tell you a good story. So this is actually beginning to happen to me with some relative frequency. I go in and I talk to a CIO. And, typically we're talking about whatever their business challenges are. And then toward the very end, I say, by the way, you may have noticed we closed on the acquisition of MySQL. And more often than not, the chief information officer will say, what's MySQL? Those are actually a declining breed. The newer ones are saying, well, we know all about MySQL, we just don't use it. And so Martin has this great tool at MySQL where you go in and you type in the name of the company and it shows you how many times they've downloaded the software. and it's CIO, the Chief of Information Security, a very important job, a curious job. And the chief technology officer, I was in talking to this. It's a very staid, formal, commercial institution. And I don't even want to give you the industry because it might be evident who they were. And I came into this meeting and I asked the CIO toward the end of the meeting, by the way, I'd be willing to tell you where we're, what the motivations were behind MySQL and where we're actually headed. And he looked at me and with a perfectly straight face said, well, we don't really use MySQL. We run on, another database. And I was going to leave it at that because, I'm there to be the executive sponsor and not to be the aggressive sales rep. But the good news was we had an aggressive sales rep in the room. And he said, I checked with a buddy of mine over at MySQL, and you said you don't use MySQL, but you've downloaded it 1,300 times in the last 12 months. And there were a few folks from IT in the room who then had the courage after a profoundly awkward silence to say, actually, we do use it. We use it every day. It's our default database. And that is happening because individuals are making choices every day, whether they're consumers or whether the developers in IT shops are driving a huge amount of change across the world. By the way, it's driving a ton of value. Just go sit down and talk to Facebook or eBay or Virgin Mobile or any of the customers we deal with across the world. It drives a huge amount of value, not simply because of the competition it provides for proprietary databases, but because of the performance it delivers, the value it delivers, and the fact that people can actually engage in the roadmap. It also drives an immense amount of value for the community. And who is the community? The community are junior high school students who are learning MySQL in Portugal. The community is university students across Asia. The community is folks who just decided they wanted to write a quick database application of MySQL is easy for them. The community is folks who are in this room. They're in most of our customers. They're down in Texas. They're across the world. And the single biggest opportunity for Sun is to figure out a way to serve that community, some of whom will be paying customers. They'll pay with money. And others will be paying customers in terms of the time, as a few of the award winners have put into improving the technology that's available broadly for the community. And I'll tell you something. In service of that community, it's actually great for Sun. Opportunities emerge everywhere across the world. And when I look at the 50 to 70,000 folks every day that download MySQL across the world, each one of those represents an opportunity for Sun. And so if you want to know what our secret plot is, it's to figure out how to serve the community. If we do that well, there's not a doubt in my mind that every large organization and enterprise across the world is going to download it, try it, start to use it, see how wonderful it is, and they'll change their view of what the future of free software is. And as that happens, it creates economic opportunity. That supercomputing facility down in Texas, it costs a fair amount of money. And it's not the budget that any one of us would have, but it's going to be used to go change the world. And as that is replicated across the world, running MySQL, running Lustre, running CentOS, running free software, it's going to create economic opportunities for us as well as all the constituencies that we ultimately serve. So that's fundamentally, that's our agenda. Now you know. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to join you.